So we did it the Cypriot way. We didn't have a break. We did a break. Then we said 5 minutes. It took 15 minutes. Anyway, welcome back. We now turn to our second session, Cyprus Prospects for the Future through the eyes of the diaspora. The Cypriot diaspora continues to play an essential role in shaping Cyprus' identity, influence, and development abroad. And our esteemed panelists are Ilke Dagli-Hastings, Director General at the Center for Sustainable Peace and Democratic Development, Christos Tsoudon, President of NEPOMAC, Christos Karaolis, President of the National Federation of Cypriots in the UK, Mr. Bambos Charalambous, Member of Parliament for Southgate and Wood Green, and Mr. Christos Passas, Director at Zaha Hadid Architects. And the session will be moderated by Latika Burke, a journalist at The Nightly. Please join me in welcoming the panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We won't take it personally that half the room seems to have vacated. At least it means you all have a bit more fresh air and more space. I'm Latika. It's very nice to be here, and we have a great panel for you this morning to discuss the Cypriot diaspora and the challenges, but also some of the positive experiences and trends that the diaspora experiences in light of the recent geopolitical changes particularly. So just to kick us off, we're going to introduce each of the panellists very quickly and ask them to talk about what they do. And we're going to start firstly on the end. Ilko, if you'd like to start.
It's on. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you for having me, for the invitation and for the opportunity to contribute. I'm Ilke. I'm kind of diaspora. It's hard to say I'm diaspora because actually I've been living here on and off for 15 years, and I married a colonial and I grew up in Famagusta. But also my organization is headquartered in Cyprus, so I actually, all the work, programs, research and projects we do are still linked to Cyprus and other fragile and conflict-affected countries. My background is in security and development, and I particularly looked at how identities and security perceptions change faster than negotiation parameters. And I was doing this comparatively, looking at Cyprus, but also Transnistria, Moldova, Ossetia, Abkhazia, and looking at how these security perceptions and identities change a lot faster than negotiation parameters. That's about me, but I will pass the mic over. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bambos. Probably needs no introduction, but always interested to hear how MPs describe themselves.
I'm Bambos Charalambous. I'm the MP for Southgate and Wood Green. I first got elected in June 2017. The constituency then was Enfield Southgate. I do represent a number of, a large part of the diaspora, both Greek and Turkish Cypriots, and have done since I was elected. And I'm a backbench MP. Labour is now in government. So my party is now trying to make a good fist of being government. Prior to that, I was a Shadow Immigration Minister and also Shadow Middle East Minister, and also had some roles in the Shadow Home Office team as well. So that's my background.
Thank you so much, Bambos. Okay, we have 3 Christoses in the panel, so just to keep it nice and simple for the moderator at least, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Christos Karaolis. I'm President of the National Federation of Cypriots in the UK. The Federation is the umbrella body for the Cypriot diaspora here in the UK with 80 member organisations. And we represent the diaspora both to the government of the UK but also the government of Cyprus. And our goals are kind of twofold. Firstly, obviously to advocate for the reunification of Cyprus in line with the agreed UN framework. But secondly, to advance and promote our kind of proud and vibrant Cypriot diaspora here in the UK.
Thank you, Christos.
Hi, I'm Christos Passas. I'm a design director at Zaha Hadid Architects. I've worked with the late Zaha Hadid for about 20 years before she passed away in 2016. I've been at the forefront of development of cities and architecture around the world. I've worked in China, in the Middle East, extensively in Russia and the former Soviet republics, and also in our beloved Cyprus for an extensive amount of time. I'm also part of the parochial community here in London, where we participate in growing Greek schools for kids to maintain connection with home and the culture, and also help the parochial communities to thrive in this ever-challenging world.
And Christos.
Hi, I'm Christos Chutin. I'm the president of Nepalmac, which is a diaspora youth organisation for Cypriots aged 18 to 30. We primarily represent kind of second and third generation Cypriots, and we have branches all around the world. So we have a branch in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, South Africa, Greece, France, and there's a small community in Zimbabwe as well. And our work is about bringing young Cypriots together and connecting them with Cyprus and their cultural and heritage.
So we've got some interesting generational differences here, and I think, Christos, I want to start with you. How engaged is the diaspora, and how have you noticed that level of engagement change over the time you've been in the role?
So the Cypriot diaspora here is absolutely moving into its second, third and fourth generation. So the first generation of Cypriots obviously did what they could when they came over from Cyprus with the constraints they had around language, money, etc. My generation, our generation coming through, is very much part of mainstream British society. We are fully ingrained in every walk of life here in the UK. And that presents both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is obviously you're not as physically or emotionally proximate to the island as the first generation because you weren't born there. And so that's why what Christos speaks about in terms of the community Greeks or something like that are really important to maintain those links. But it also presents a huge opportunity because the networks that we move in are very different to the networks that the first generation moved in. So professionally, I'm a partner in a consultancy firm. So I deal with CEOs, CFOs, etc. So your ability to actually raise awareness and advocate for Cyprus is exponentially greater than the first generation because of the networks you move in and because of the background that you have. So actually the challenge for us as a federation, as a community, is how do we maintain those links back to the island and that passion and that pride for Cyprus amongst subsequent generations. And, you know, from what I see, my generation does remain proud of Cyprus. And don't, you know, I wouldn't misread the fact that you maybe don't see hordes of people parading themselves around as a lack of interest or excitement for Cyprus. People are passionate in their own way. Con over there's a great example. He'll be on the next panel. But, you know, he's deeply passionate and proud about Cyprus and, you know, has a fantastic job at Bloomberg. You know, we have really great examples of people who, when they need to, do stuff for Cyprus. They might not be there everywhere all the time, but when they're needed, they are around. And the one thing I would say about Brexit is that I do think that awakened maybe a latent sentiment in the diaspora, because we have seen a really significant step change in engagement post-Brexit as second and third generation have started looking for their roots, where they might, and there's obviously, I'm not going to be naive to the fact there is obviously a tactical advantage. They might want an EU passport, so I'm not naive to that. But I do think there is a deeper emotional connection where actually the younger generation have started to explore some of that. And so we've certainly seen an uptick in engagement from younger generation immediately post-Brexit as well.
Yeah, fascinating. Christos Passos, I would love to hear from you, your story. You're a refugee. Maybe you could talk to us a bit about some of those distinctions that Christos was talking about, how you have found the changes in the diaspora and also your own, I guess, relationship with the diaspora and your own view about how you are a shepherd of this and a custodian of this.
So thanks for asking the question. I think, like so many other Cypriots, being a refugee in today's world is a very interesting experience to try to have humanistic and first-hand sort of empathy for what is going on in the world so extensively. But also becoming a refugee, I think in my 50s now, I'm beginning to realize that the loss of home, especially at a very young age, is a very kind of drastic effect that forces you to develop survival mechanisms that are not perhaps embedded in everybody. And I think that gives you also a different sort of relationship to the world. Through my work with Zaha Hadid architects, we have had, after many years of working internationally and exploring ideas of what a new world could be, I think we are now, I'm going to try to loop this all together because for two reasons. First of all, the previous panel spoke from a very multilateral point of view, but always within a geopolitical framework. I think there is also another layer of conversation that needs to be had, which is the identity politics that goes beyond kind of the interests of countries, capitalist interests, but go beyond to how we identify ourselves. And then there is another level, I think, which is beyond identity that we need to start exploring as humanity. But altogether, I think we live in a kind of a postmodern makeup where identities are very much fragmented. So, like Christos is saying, we can be here, first, second, third generation Cypriots of the diaspora, but we are equally British as much as we are, Cypriots, maybe, to varying degrees. And what we always talk about is that you never quite feel at home anywhere, So
you
that
still feel
in
like
between,
that?
Yes. So my daughter doesn't because she was born here, to my pain and suffering, but she feels like that. It's everybody's life, even within the same families, has different nuances to it. So back to the postmodern sort of condition, I think the role of diaspora is changing. Also, the role of a country state is changing drastically. So Cyprus is no longer the island that is thrown off some sort of corner of the Eastern Mediterranean. It's a very expansive network of activities and people, and so is every other country, to be frank. So country states are no longer within their own geographical boundaries. It's very important to understand that. It's also very important to understand what it is that we project as cultural entities and what it is that we want the world to know about us, whether we are Americans, Indians, Russians, Ukrainians, whatever, from whichever. There's 193 countries, but there is like 10,000 types of different cultural identities. And I think it's important to begin to recognize that. And beyond that, I think if I can also mention one more thing, in terms of the diaspora, our role and our link here is to preserve and recreate those cultural identities. And in doing so, I think we maybe hope to preserve the richness of the humankind as has been developed over millennia.
Christos, I hadn't planned it like this, but I'm going to come to you because I think what Christos there has talked about are some really interesting questions for you. You operate an international arm. What is the diaspora trying to achieve if you have a single message through all of those countries? Where do you see the engagement is greatest? And how difficult or how easy is it in this modern world to ensure that all these desired projections of Cyprus and the Cypriot communities are indeed reflected the way you want them to be?
I think it's been fascinating to kind of see how, in my experience, I've been in the organisation for 10, 11 years now, so I'm right at the end of the age range. But I think it's been really interesting to see how kind of diverse the diaspora is in a way. I kind of came at it and joined the organisation with kind of my own background and experience, which was growing up in North London, kind of a very highly concentrated Cypriot community. And I met people who were kind of from all different corners of the UK, all different parts of the world, who were coming at it just from a very different perspective. So I think what we've kind of acknowledged and realised is that actually what needs to be offered to the diaspora is a very diverse thing. You need to be able to connect with people who are interested in learning the language of Cyprus, in kind of learning about kind of traditional dance or culture or food or kind of even just visiting the island itself. So what you see is that people kind of bring what their family's background, their family's story is to the organisation. And so we've had to adapt and offer kind of a diverse range of opportunities for people to connect with Cyprus. And I think what you find, and that presents a challenge, right? So you have to kind of have enough kind of pockets for people to engage. But you also have to just be kind of, I think, conscious that not everybody does have the same experience of their Cypriot heritage as you might, and it is really important to understand what those points of connection are. And I think you see kind of interesting here in the perspectives there about kind of never feeling quite at home. I think what you find is that you get this real energy when you meet other people from the Cypriot diaspora, especially if you haven't had many cousins or friends around you that when you were growing up. And so what we kind of see through the organisation is that people are coming at it from such a diverse set of backgrounds, but actually there's that spark that's just lit when they get the opportunity to engage with Cyprus. And that's kind of in a way that people who maybe were born and raised in Cyprus won't experience, that kind of the switching on of their Cypriot identity. And I think that's a really powerful thing to kind of see, and I've seen it on so many occasions in the organisation.
Bambas, in your time as an MP, you've been in opposition. Now, as you mentioned, you're making a good go at government. Good go is subjective, just kidding. How have you seen the climate for political interest in the Cypriot cause over your time, and how is that changing for you now as a government backbencher as opposed to an opposition one?
There's always been an interest in Cyprus amongst parliamentarians, but there has also been a big churn in members of parliament, both in 2019 and in 2024. So that means sometimes you have to remind people what's happening in Cyprus, but people do have a fond connection with Cyprus, whether that's as a holiday destination, whether they've worked there. One former member of parliament got married in Cyprus, so there is that connection. So it's already you already have a way in when you discuss that. Although people will often just raise it with me, so they would just say, "Oh, you're from Cyprus. I was there not so long ago." There's also a parliamentary armed services scheme, and one of the places that this is where MPs shadow the Air Force, the Navy, the Army. They go to various places where there are bases. So some parliamentarians will be going to Cyprus in June. They'll be visiting Akrodiri, and that'll be part of their scheme. So there's already that connection. It's always been quite easy to raise it with the foreign affairs team of the day. So although in the last administration there were a number of Europe ministers, so you had to start all over again with whoever was the Europe minister that week. But
we knew this one was coming.
Yeah. But Stephen Doughty, who is the Europe minister, he understands the issue very well. He has been very engaged. And I think the difference that we're seeing now is that you have a foreign affairs team that is very keen to play a bigger role.
And to what end? To achieve what? What progress do you think your government might make by the end of your 5 years?
Well, to be, number one, it's being engaged with internationally to use the UK's influence and bear in mind the UK has had a very long connection with Cyprus, but also further afield across Europe. So you've seen this coalition of the willing. So again, that probably wouldn't have happened under the previous administration. So the desire to be more involved in trying to help resolve conflicts or long-entrenched, frozen situations that might need help. So I think that willingness to be more involved is a very welcome new role that's being played. I think understanding the issues, not just relying on officials, and actually having that deeper knowledge is also helpful for the ministers. And I mean, with Stephen, he was a shadow minister in that role for at least 4 years. So 3 years, 4 years. So he's had all those connections. So I was a shadow minister, so much of it is about meeting lots of different groups, meeting lots of different ambassadors, lots of different ministers, building on those connections. So when you are finding a position where you can influence things, you've already established those connections. So Stephen and David and others in the team have done that really well. And I think that's allowed them to hit the ground running. So that does make a big difference. So I think the you will see the UK playing a very delicate but helpful role in trying to resolve issues.
Yes, please.
Can I be more explicit than Bambos maybe wants to be? And given I know we have Matthew here from the Foreign Office team, our expectation from the UK is that actually it does get Turkey back to the negotiating table on the agreed UN framework, that actually it plays an active role in terms of getting us to a solution that is fully in line with the UN framework, that kind of ends the kind of guarantees and foreign troops on the island, because the UK has a strong interest in the island and what happens there. So I'll be a little bit more direct than Bambos, but that's our expectation.
That's the ask. How confident are you that there will be progress made on that?
Look, I mean, I think it's going to depend on a couple of dimensions. One, there's now there's an EU envoy as well. So the EU envoy has a really critical role to play because a post-solution Cyprus is going to be in the EU. So the EU needs to be at the table during the talks. And so if we can get the EU involved, if we can get Turkey back to the table on the agreed UN framework, and what President Christodoulidis is doing in terms of positive incentives to get Turkey back to the table, it is the right outlook. That can be reinforced by the UK as well, right? The UK is going to be talking about a trade deal with Turkey soon. There's going to be something that, in the same vein as the EU is looking at positive incentives, the UK could be doing the same. So really it hinges on getting Turkey back to the table. If we can do that, and the UK has a critical role to play, then there should be an alignment of incentives that get us there. I recognise there's elections in the north that are due soon, so that's a whole different kettle of fish that we need to deal with, but that doesn't absolve anyone of their responsibility.
Ilka, I don't know if you want to take this one specifically or anyone else on the panel, but if you're sitting in the Foreign Office right now, you're not short of things on your plate, and you're certainly not short of conflicts that are a little hotter to deal with right now, here today. How much do you think Cyprus gets a look in this climate?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think it builds on to the first panel as well, because I think at the first glance, Cyprus is a comfortable conflict, right? In the bigger scheme of things, it's a very comfortable conflict, relatively. Maybe less comfortable for Turkish Cypriots. But what the previous panel kind of concluded that I think is really valid to this question is that stabilization is not charity and is strategy. And Cyprus is a fertile ground to do stabilization for the region and for Cyprus itself. Cyprus needs to play a bigger role serving stabilization in the region that it's sitting in, because it is safe, because it has come a long way in peace building, in people-to-people contact, in civil society strengthening. I work a lot in Moldova. And when I go to Moldova and see the peace building, where the peace building stage is with Gagauzia, with Transnistria in Moldova, is 20 years behind where Cyprus was. We've got a lot to export in terms of what we learned. We have a lot to pollinate. And I think we have not fully capitalized on that knowledge, on that experience, and how far we've come. Because we also fall into this despondent trap that nothing is changing or everything is still the same. Maybe at the outcome level that we have not signed an agreement, but a lot has changed. And I grew up in a Cyprus where we couldn't cross. I grew up in a Cyprus where I couldn't travel outside. And in terms of people-to-people contact, civil society, in terms of how our perceptions of each other and of identities and what it means to do peace building has changed a lot. So I think if we consider stabilization a strategy, then Cyprus should be very central to that, because it's not only for Cyprus, but it's what Cyprus can do and deliver for others too.
You know, that's such a good point, because we rarely hear about conflict zones offering things to other people. It's always presented as the drag and the burden on everybody else. That's a very, very good point to have raised. How much do you see the job of the diaspora then being about encouraging and fostering a peaceful resolution at this civic level versus trying to drive what you were talking about there, Christos, a government? And in the event that it is a government, is it the British or is it someone else that ends up trying to resolve this?
So the diaspora, we are very fortunate here in the UK that actually we do have a very vibrant Cypriot, and I mean Greek and Turkish and Maronite and Latino diaspora here in the UK. And therefore we do and can send positive signals back to the island. Only 2 weekends ago, there was a bicommunal festival in North London that was really well attended. It was organised by 9 organisations, Greek and Turkish Cypriot, that sent that positive signal back.
That's impressive in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, we do lots of work with Greek and Turkish Cypriot groups. You know, we've published joint statements when the UN envoy was appointed, before the talks in March. So there's a lot that as a Cypriot diaspora we can do to reinforce that actually there is a common view here, grassroots, across Greek and Turkish Cypriots, that we do want to see a reunited island, right? We don't subscribe some of the narrative that's being pushed by Mr. Tatar and others around partition. We want to see the island reunited. So as a Cypriot diaspora here in the UK, that's what we're kind of living, breathing and messaging. In addition to obviously making requests of our government. And the reason why obviously I emphasise the UK government is because I'm a British taxpayer, British citizen. That's my government. Right? It's not the government of Cyprus. Obviously, we represent our diaspora to them, but I vote and live here. And so that's why my reference comes to that.
Understood. Christos?
I think sometimes the way we build habits and behaviors of discussing problems becomes the issue in itself. And I think oftentimes, you know, discussing the conflict becomes the matter and not the conflict itself. You know, or whatever has to be resolved. And that's why I started off my introduction earlier by speaking about cultural politics and identity, because I think Cyprus is now at a stage, you know, as a young country. It's only been founded, let's say, as a state in 1960, so it's only been 65 years. So, you know, it's in a process of evolution, and when it comes to discussing what Cyprus projects as a state for the future, for the 21st, 22nd century, I think it's very important to begin to speculate new forms of organization.
What is the image in your mind that you see?
You know, the image is not just for Cyprus. I think the whole world. You cannot isolate one part of the world anymore and begin to build images. We live in a big mosaic of situations, of conditions, and I think, if anything, the shift of the conversation, or the phenomenal shift of the conversation from globalization to regionalization, is a little bit perverse in itself, because globalization would have never happened without, first of all, regionalization. That has always been the conversation, and nobody ever thought that we would suddenly go from small sort of agricultural communities to a big planetary sort of governance system. Yeah, that would be foolish for anybody to think. So we're in the process of negotiating all of those things. And I think when it comes to the matter of Cyprus, that negotiation is also quite pertinent, because it becomes a pressure cooker of experiments, all these conversations of what a potential future could be, not only for Cyprus, but generally for the region, and most probably also for the world, because the conditions of, let's say, conflict, I use the term very loosely, are so interesting, mathematically, politically, culturally, etc. It becomes almost like a kind of an unsolvable problem which needs an elevation to a next level, to a higher level, to be able to see it and resolve it properly, you know.
Bambas, at your level, when you're dealing and raising Cyprus, is it an intractable conflict? Is it the frozen, comfortable conflict? Is it something you see that has the opportunity to progress within, say, a first term of a Labor government? And is it something that you even see Britain leading here, using trade deals with Turkey as potential leverage? Or do you think Britain can't do this alone? It would need a third partner, or even a couple of partners?
I definitely think progress can be made, and part of the desire is to make sure that people are talking. The most dangerous time is when people are not talking and nothing's happening. So the fact there are things going on, there are trade deals to be made, there are lots of moving parts, I think that really does help. Whether the UK can do it on its own or with the support of others, I think it will be with the support of others, because I think it's too much for just one nation to be able to do. So I think there is a phrase, I can handle the despair, but it's the hope that kills you. And there have been many false dawns before, but I really do think that this time we are in a position where real progress can be made, almost unexpectedly, and that progress is being very much supported by the UK government. And
who do you see as the most likely sort of partner? EU? The US seems very distracted by other conflicts at the moment.
I think the EU have a key role to play. I think also other partners in the region as well. Obviously, the Cyprus is in a very strategic role, but what Cyprus has been very good at doing is making connections with other partners, whether that's with Egypt or with Israel or with Jordan or Lebanon or with other countries. So it does have that strategic role that it can play as being like like an oasis in the storm, perhaps, like something, or an oasis in the desert. So I think it's like that sort of, people can come to Cyprus, they feel safe there, they're able to, Cyprus has a good reputation. So I think engaging with those other countries could be absolutely key. Again, it's not just about trade deals, there are other discussions that can take place, but I think trade is obviously one of the factors. So I'm quietly hopeful and optimistic, but we have to take this step by step.
Yeah, I think I wanted to come here because also Cyprus has come very, very close to finding a solution, right? It's not that intractable. A lot of the chapters have been resolved. The negotiators themselves have agreed and said publicly that they're 98% there. There's only 2% left to go. So overall in the global politics, in terms of how close we are to solving different conflicts, we're so close. So it can be a good, quick, low-hanging fruit success story for the region, but for the actors, whether it's the EU or the UK. I think what matters, so it's not worth asking the questions of what do we do about property or security. I think those issues have been resolved. What matters is taking the leap of faith. So that's what we've got left to do, is to take the leap of faith. And that matters for process and timing. Because for me, it's really important to time it right, with the right process, because the cost of failure is huge, right?
And can I just one thing, it's also about getting the right people at the right time in the right place. And I think in the past, you haven't always had the right people at the right time. And I think now, we are getting closer to that position.
You think the current set of leaders are more ready than before?
It's the leap of faith issues. I think so. It's being willing to take that leap of faith. So I think hopefully we're getting there.
One institution nobody ever seems to raise these days is the Commonwealth. Is there any role that the Commonwealth could play for Cyprus here, or is that institution now just so far out of the game in terms of being a player of any sort? I don't know who wants to take that. Bambos? You've got the mic.
So in Westminster there's something called the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. So I'm on the executive of the CPA, and Cyprus has played a key role with the CPA as well in the past, and it does create opportunities where you can link with other Commonwealth countries and discuss various issues that affect you all, or you have like a common interest about the relationship with the UK. So I think the Commonwealth does have a key role to play, and I think the UK's role with the Commonwealth is also key, because there was a fear that would be somehow watered down after the Queen passed away. So I think with Prince Charles, or King Charles as he now is, sorry, I Freudian slip there, but with King Charles, I think he's very passionate about keeping the Commonwealth alive and about having a new impetus, new energy. So I think Cyprus has a big role to play in that, and I think that could also reap benefits long term.
Christos, I can see you champing at the bit here.
Just to say really quickly that, kind of going back to the point about Brexit and kind of the post-Brexit world, there could have been a scenario where the UK embraced the Commonwealth more, and that might have had a more dynamic role in this kind of thing. But it looks like actually that isn't the reality, and it has fallen back to kind of the big players, the EU, the US, the UK, to kind of shape these discussions.
And do you think that Brexit makes that dynamic more of a problem, or there are some actual silver linings there for Cyprus?
I think it is. I think it's kind of given the UK a bit more freedom to kind of engage with the EU more positively, engage with Turkey on some of these opportunities that it has now. So there are more doors open and tools available diplomatically for the UK, I think, in this world than there might have been previously.
Very interesting. We are going to open for some questions soon, so if anyone does have any questions for our panellists, please do make yourself known. In fact, I can see a question here. We may as well, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, given your extended Cypriot coffee break timing. This woman here in the pink jacket. Thank you.
It's a question for Bambos. Oh, sorry. Got quite a loud voice anyway. For Bambos, I was thinking, because as we were talking about Brexit, about the loss of MEPs and how has that gap been plugged? I mean, I know the EP has an office here in London, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about maybe committees, or how do we get through to this level of making knowledge about the Cyprus and various issues? Because obviously this was a very active forum prior to Brexit.
I mean, there is the Council of Europe still, so I think that's also an opportunity to raise issues in the Council of Europe. But there are also other opportunities as well. So I think having MEPs, whilst it's a huge loss, I think we'll just have to accept that. But it's also about making connections with the other countries, whether it's bilateral or whether it's via other ways. And that's not always down to parliamentarians, but it's but the UK can also bring people together. But I think on the elected front, on elected representatives, the MEP situation just has gone, and we're desperately trying to rebuild those connections with our European partners. Yesterday I was in Dublin. I was on with the procedure committee. We were doing an inquiry into independent members of parliament, but they were very keen to welcome us to the Dáil, and so we made a very good impression when we went there. So I think more visits like that make a good impression for the UK.
I mean, have either of you two in your organisations seen or filled any gaps here, but since Brexit, of needing to formalise cross-channel connections that used to just naturally exist, or has this been able to continue on?
I mean, in reality, at an organisational level, not really. I mean, we obviously have sister organisations in different countries. Likewise, we have sister organisations in France and other countries in Europe that we work with to kind of coordinate a message. But you just have to adapt to the new reality of post-Brexit, right? So that's what we're working with.
And you found it organically, just continuing on those relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and if anything, it's meant that, probably much to Bambos's parliamentary colleagues' annoyance, we've doubled down on parliamentary engagement. So hey, every cloud has a silver lining.
More targets on your back, Bambos. Do we have any other questions in the room? Yes, this gentleman here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, going back to the Cyprus problem, there seems to be a misalignment on perceptions about the Cyprus problem, which is obviously we're in democracy. But where do these misalignments align is that there's a stigma of distrust in government institutions, and this is evident in the European elections that were quite recent in Cyprus. So my question for the panel is, how is this perceived by Cypriots of the diaspora? And going back to the discussion on engaging in conversations, what kind of conversations are we talking about? Is it more on a political landscape, or is it engaging with the public and actually listen to what they have to say?
I mean, this is a great question, I think, for you, Christos.
Yes, I think, so obviously we've talked about kind of political will and the role of leadership there, and I think that's kind of the most important factor. So, and I don't think that's something that can really be solved through the diaspora, apart from through that pressure on the British government to play a more positive and active role. But in terms of kind of the experience of the diaspora, I think there is something there that can be learned in Cyprus. So I mentioned that I grew up in a kind of highly concentrated community of Cypriots in North London. And what you find there is that in my school there were Greek and Turkish Cypriots, and it wasn't a major issue at all. There weren't tensions. There were the same friendship groups. You'd play football together. You'd kind of socialise, and it showed that there is a clear community, and we're talking about Bambos's constituency very much here, where you don't have those people-to-people issues, and you see that the value of kind of the day-to-day interactions. And the question is kind of what makes that successful in London? Is it about trust in institutions to kind of resolve any differences that people would have? Is it just the general kind of feeling of multiculturalism that, you know, we don't stand out as being different to each other in a city that has people from thousands of different cultural backgrounds and mixed backgrounds? So I think there's something there in Cyprus to kind of learn about the importance of those interactions and trust and kind of building up the relationships between people and organisations.
Ilka, I think this is a good question for you too, because there's this distinction between, are we pressuring politicians or is it at the civic level? And you do a lot of work at the civic level.
Yeah, I think it's several things I wanted to kind of maybe separate out on the civic level. One, yes, we do need more dialogue. And that dialogue and contact theory works, right? We know contact theory works everywhere in the world. The European Union is a good example of this. But dialogue needs to be structured and focused. Otherwise, people feel their times are being wasted, they don't get the feedback, or they get more fatigue than apathy. But for contact theory and dialogue to work, we need structure, but we need consistency, frequency, and meaning. Right? If the consistency of dialogue is on and off, and if the meaning is, there's no structure and meaning to it, and no feedback loops, and it's not frequent enough, it stays exception to the rule. And exceptions to the rule do not help us progress. So I think when we think about dialogue, we need to think about mechanisms for that dialogue. It's not about putting people in a room to get them talk about something and then go home in their busy days. Are we talking about question time that UK does really well? Are we talking about civic assemblies? What kind of structured mechanisms can we build for meaningful
or even
dialogue?
Cultural points,
yes,
which I think can be some of the most powerful. The Olympics is a good example, right?
Absolutely, and I think this is what you were saying, Christos, at the start, right? We've got wider networks now in Cyprus and outside of Cyprus, and wider occupational networks. I think we sometimes fall into this repetition habit of doing peace building literally. Like we do peace building by talking about peace. I don't think that's how we need to do peace building, by talking about peace. We can do peace building occupationally. I think one of the best peace building efforts in Cyprus that succeeded meaningfully were the tattoo artists and the jazz musicians. And I think occupations bring commonalities and common denominators without politicizing, which has become a tainted word, and then many people shy from it when we politicize peace like that. Thank you.
That was a great comment.
If I
Okay.
may, I would like to go back to the question that the gentleman asked and follow up on what you're saying on the communication and the contact. I don't know if it's about formalized dialogue or whether it's about organic dialogue. I have a lot of Turkish Cypriot friends. I worked with some of them, Safet Bekiroglu and others, who live now and work in Nicosia. And I think getting to know people on a personal level absolutely eliminates a lot of the posturing and the conversation formalisms that get embedded with institutional talk. And I think, where does that happen? Civic talk, of course, is a very important place or format. I think our project in Nicosia, Eleftheria Square, was a project that was predominantly for getting space, public space, for people to be able to go in and to engage. And it's not just community differences that we have to bridge, it's also differences within ourselves that we have to bridge to be able to get a better awareness and a better understanding of what we are. So public space is very important, building parks, building the spaces where people go there with unfettered interest to be able to discuss and converse and get to know each other. So bottom-up politics, very important in this case, and I think the diaspora can help in that because it has first-hand experience in doing this in the UK very, very successfully, but also on the island and in social media and elsewhere to build places where people can actually meet and talk on a humane level. So the future is about sustainability. You asked me before, I failed to answer it successfully. It's about greenness, it's about inclusivity, most importantly about justice and personal integrity, and I think if we can get those things right, I think we have a lot to say for ourselves.
Okay, well, we have to wrap up, unfortunately. We've run out of time. So if you could all please thank our wonderful panellists for that great conversation. I really enjoyed it.